folks, hope you're all doing well. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit as a fellow student, so I decided to get cozy and, put on my U Ottawa sweatshirt, show a little school pride. And I got a really interesting question recently from a student in my class asking what was something I wish I learned previously. And I thought this was a really great question, and I actually had to think about it for quite a bit. And I'm assuming you'd all want to hear things more about grad school in general, rather than things like, oh, I wish I'd known about social constructivism going in, because that's not particularly helpful to others. And as I'm sure many of you aren't surprised to hear, one of the big things that came up for me was readings. As I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, there is a lot of readings in grad school, and it can be really overwhelming and really difficult to get through all of them while also maintaining your sanity. And I feel like with every degree I've been shocked by just how much reading I have to do for that degree. It seems to grow with each one that I do. And one of my courses in my PhD, we had to read a book a week. And I'm not talking, like Bernstein Bears Go to the Doctor. I'm talking things like the TRC report summary, Finnish lessons, ideology and curriculum, democracy and education. Although with this one we did have 2 weeks because John Dewey is a notoriously difficult to understand writer. So something I didn't pick up until my PhD was being able to speed read. And by speed read, I mean being able to skim a whole lot of literature in a very short amount of time. Keyword, skimming. So the approach that I've taken to my readings is kind of as though I'm inspecting a patient's abdomen. So I want to start with inspection, auscultation, percussion, and palpation. So I usually start by taking just a look at the book or inspecting it. So who wrote it? Who is the author? What are they all about? Have they written other things? Sometimes I'll also take a look at a few book reviews that have been written by other people. This gives me an idea of what the book is about and some of the criticisms that other people have pointed out in it, which may help shape the way I'm reading the book. I also take a look at where the article is published and who published it. And the next thing I do is auscultation, and that is, in my case, it's listening to what the prof wants me to get out of this book. So what is the purpose for the prof assigning this? Is it to do a reader response paper? Am I doing some sort of a book review for a class? Is it to inform class discussion? Keeping this in mind is really going to shape how I read the book and what type of notes I'm making as I go through it. And then percussion. So that's the initial little bits of tapping on that book. So this is when I actually crack it open and I kind of see what's in it. So for example, skimming the table of contents. What's actually in the book? How long are each of the chapters going to be? How do I want to break up doing the reading, and how am I going to approach this? This helps me get the big picture of what this book is really about. And then palpation. And this is really when I get in there and do the reading. And of course by reading, I mean skim reading, because nobody has time for that many books. So everyone may have a slightly different approach to this. For me, part of it is shaped by reading those early book reviews, by looking at what my prof actually wants me to do with it. And one of the things I'll also do is when I'm looking at a paragraph, I'll take a look at the introduction. And if the introduction sentence seems kind of irrelevant to me and what I need to actually do with this book for my course, I sometimes skip ahead to the concluding sentence. And then I ask myself, can I carry on at this point, or do I feel like I missed something and I really need to go back and actually read the paragraph? Because to be honest, sometimes there's paragraphs, especially in books, where the author is just going on and on and on. And sometimes I wonder why the publisher and the editor just didn't, axe that and edit it out. And another thing I started doing was actually marking up my books. So when I was in nursing school, I had this obsession with not marking up my books, not highlighting in them, not writing in them, not even putting tabs on them or anything, because I had this obsession with this idea of I needed to be able to resell my books. And of course, if they're written in and highlighted in, the bookstore wouldn't give me as much money for them. However, I almost never sold a textbook, except maybe some of my courses that were outside of nursing. And this kind of paranoia about marking up my books persisted into my master's degree. So if we take a look at books from my master's, as you can see, they're pretty immaculate, and there is no writing, there's no highlighting. It pretty much looks brand new. That all changed when I got to my PhD and I had to read a book a week, and I thought I was going to go crazy. So now, as you can see, my books look very different. So this is an example for my PhD. I don't know how well it shows up on there, but yeah, see, lots of highlighting. I write in my margins. I mark it up. No one's going to want to buy this book from me, and that's okay. And for my current students, my copy of Engaging Mind, it's not as bad as some of my stuff from my PhD, but as you can see, I take a very similar approach. Now, something I wish I knew specifically in my master's degree was how to write reading notes. And this isn't really something I learned how to do until I got into my PhD. And I had a professor teach us how to do these in one of my courses. And I find reading notes really useful because I read so much, and sometimes it's hard to retain everything or to remember, like, where did I actually read that? Or what was the author's main point? So here's an example of how I was taught how to do a reading note. So at the top here I have my citation, followed by a quick summary of how I interpreted the author's argument for that paper or book. I mentioned usually the research strategy. So sometimes like this one here, it's just a philosophical one. Sometimes it could be qualitative, like an ethnography, or it could be a mixed methods paper. And then I've jotted down a few main points from that reading to help kind of jog my memory if I can't remember. And then at the end, I usually have a comments section. So sometimes this will be like making connections, especially when in my courses we read a lot of things that had more to do with teaching children, whereas I do adult education, specifically usually health professions education. So a lot of times in the comments section, I would use this to kind of bring these ideas together, like what pieces can I take from this reading and how can I apply it to health professions education? And then at the end, usually I would list some questions off. For example, what's a question that maybe I have for my professor? What's a question I want to look into more myself? Or what's a question I just want to discuss with my peers in class? And then at the end, I would do an additional resources. So anything extra I brought in that comments section to kind of have that scholarly discussion with myself, I would cite down there. I usually try to keep my reading notes to 1 page, but sometimes they get a little longer, especially with bigger books. But I try not to go over 2 pages. And I still do write these reading notes even though I've been done my coursework for a couple of years, because I do find them to be very helpful. And I do regularly refer back to my previous reading notes. And my final thing that I picked up in grad school that I wish I had known going in is the importance of self-care. And it's not that I didn't know about self-care and taking care of myself on an intellectual level. When I went through nursing school, we actually took an entire course that was on self-care. But I always thought about this more in terms of coping with a difficult shift or the loss of a patient, maybe some, weird interprofessional dynamics on the unit. I hadn't really thought about how this applied to me as a learner until I did my master's degree. And in my master's degree, I did not prioritize myself or my self-care. And it was tough because I was new to a city where I didn't know anyone, I didn't have any family, I didn't have much of a local support system, I pulled a lot of all-nighters trying to get through my coursework, never asked my professors for extensions when I needed them, and I started to suffer a lot with anxiety and panic attacks. And it is not worth it. Your health and your well-being and your family's health and well-being is so much more important than anything you're going to do in grad school. So prioritize it. If you need an extension, ask. Profs are humans too, and they're usually pretty accommodating when you need some extra help. Our faculty in particular is also extremely accommodating. That being said, sometimes you can't get something accommodated, and in which case you need to decide what you're just going to let go. So for example, during my coursework for my PhD, I needed to have hand surgery, and I had been on a wait list for quite a while, hoping either a cancellation would come up or because my surgery was only supposed to be about an hour, hour and a half, like potentially could get scheduled in at the end of the day or in between another case. And I told my professors this right at the start of the semester. First day, I'm on a wait list for a surgery. I don't know if it's even going to happen this semester, but if it does, I have no idea how much warning I'm going to get. And in the end, I only had a week's notice. So most of my profs were really, really accommodating and either gave me extensions or we just found another way that I could meet some of the requirements. But I wasn't accommodated in one of my classes, and this was the one where we had to read a book a week and we had to write a reading note on it. And that professor, unfortunately, wasn't very accommodating. And by not very accommodating, I mean I wasn't given an extension or anything. And this was a weekly reading assignment where we had to read a book a week, so it's not like I was super disorganized and I'd fallen behind, just I was on the previous book that was due for the class. So I'd have to read an entire book, which was an absolute mammoth of a book, and then write some sort of somewhat intelligent sounding response to it while I had one hand bandaged up and I was on Percocet. And this assignment was only worth maybe 5% of my mark. So you know what I did? I let it go. It was not worth it. And I'm really glad I made that decision, and even at the end of the term, when our final grades came in, I totally stood by that decision and I was better for it. So yeah, those are probably my 3 big things I would say I learned in grad school and I wish I had known at the start. So being able to skim read, writing reading notes, and taking care of myself, I would say were the most important things I wish I knew going in. So comment down below or send me an email. I'd be really interested to hear what something is that you've learned in grad school that you wish you knew going in. And that's all for now, folks. And if you are one of my students, I will be seeing you all online. Bye!